People have to realize that California leads the nation in motorcycle registrations. And so there's going to be a lot more motorcycles here than they will find in other places. They have to share the road with that motorcycle, and it's going to take a little extra caution on their part to double check their blind spots. A common mistake made by the automobile driver, they will enter the left turn lane and observe a car approaching them from the opposite direction. And then they will anticipate that car clearing them and immediately start their left turn without checking the other lanes that original car had blocked out. So when that car passes their location, what they need to do is just take that extra second so they can double check the other lanes and make sure there isn't a motorcycle that's going to cross their path as they make their left turn. In many motorcycle versus car crashes, the motorcycle has ended up in the blind spot of the car. So the drivers do have to take a look over their shoulders, either left or right, and look through those side windows to make sure that a motorcycle isn't there. If they don't have those habits, eventually they're going to lane change and a motorcycle is going to be there. Something I see quite often on California freeways are automobiles following motorcycles too closely. A good motorcycle rider on today's motorcycle can outstop a car. I realize that the recommended following distance is 3 to 4 seconds as you're traveling down the road. However, with a motorcycle, you may even want to extend that just a little bit more. Motorcycles can outstop you. So if you allow yourself just a couple of more seconds beyond that, you can certainly avoid a lot of potential accidents.
Many drivers are under the impression that if the sign says that this is a maximum speed limit, that you can drive at that speed under all conditions. And it's just the opposite. That's the fastest, or that's the maximum speed that you can travel under ideal driving conditions. So when you have adverse weather, tell yourself, if a hazard were suddenly to appear in the roadway around this next curve or just ahead of this vehicle that's in front of me, or if that vehicle in front of me were to suddenly stop, would I be able to safely slow down and stop without hitting that hazard?
Rain gets no respect. It's sort of like the Rodney Dangerfield of the weather conditions, you know. If it's snowing and icy out, we say, hey, it's snowing, it's icy, I better be careful. So we have a visual cue that this could be dangerous for us. But when it's raining, it's just raining. And drivers don't appreciate the fact that their envelope of traction, the control that they have, is going to be greatly diminished because of that rain.
When it's raining, not only can you not see, now the road is slippery. And people are driving like it's a beautiful, sunny, hot day. It's not. You've got to take so many things into consideration. You've got to keep that distance. You've got to slow down. And you can't make sudden moves with the car because you're going to spin out of control.
And if you take a look at any intersection, it's where you're going to have a lot of oil deposits on the road. And when it starts to rain, the water is heavier than the oil, so the oil is going to float up to the top. And a driver now coming into that same intersection, when it just begins to rain, trying to stop as they may be accustomed to, at the last moment slamming the brakes on, now hits this little layer of oil-water mixture, and they're going to slide and possibly crash into the car in front because they don't have the good habit of stopping far enough back. So they're victimized by their bad habit.
If you're driving in adverse conditions, whether it's snow or rain, and you're approaching a curve, you want to start braking before you get to the curve and try to negotiate the curve without using your brakes as much as possible or using them very lightly. So you want to brake in a straight line as much as possible.
And as weather conditions change, it's raining all day, the temperature has dropped down to 30 degrees. Now we have some freezing water. We have some loose water on top of freezing water. And a person's going to go into that curve. It's like playing Russian roulette if you don't reduce your speed.
When the roads are wet, icy, or snowy, speed is your enemy. Reducing your speed, giving you more time to react to hazards, and that is a secret to safe driving. Avoid skids. If you get into a skid, either a broadside or a locked wheel skid, that's an enemy because you've lost control of your car.
If you do find yourself in a skid, best thing you can do is get off of the brakes. Even though you might be thinking to yourself, I won't have enough space to stop, if you keep skidding, you definitely won't have enough space to stop. It'll take you a much further distance to bring your vehicle to a stop if it's sliding than if your wheels are actually turning.
The major thing that you have to do is concentrate on your steering, because that's what's going to give you the best chance to get out of the situation. So we always concentrate on trying to get the front of the car to go where we wanted it to go in the first place. Steer the front of the car where you wanted it to go before it started to skid. And if you're going into a curve or up over a hill crest, you don't know what's on the other side. So there's two things you have to do, and it has to take place automatically. Reduce your speed and give yourself the curiosity to ask what's on the other side, rather than assume it's going to be okay. And if we're asking ourselves the right question, we're going to see the information a lot sooner.
When something occurs in front of you, you want to have some other option available besides slamming on the brakes. So once a person identifies a potential hazard, there's basically 4 options they have to avoid a collision. One would be the brakes. Another one would be steering either to the left or to the right. And then a 4th option would be to speed up. So they need to start thinking about, well, what can I do besides slamming on the brakes? A lot of times steering out of the way, steering up on the shoulder of the road, maybe hitting a paddle marker or a guardrail rather than rear-ending another car. Now, those are options that are available if we would think about them ahead of time.
Maintain your car, make sure it's in good running order, and that means not only the lights, the tail lights, the engine, the tires, but make sure the windshield is clean.
We found that if the tires are more firmly inflated, you're able to have better steering capabilities with that handling characteristics with the car. So it's one of the cheapest things that they could do for preventive maintenance is keep the proper tire and pressures.
If you feel a catastrophic tire failure while you're driving, the best thing you can do is to gradually come to a stop. Avoid locking up the brakes again, because you may end up losing control of the car. Just take your foot off the gas pedal, make sure you have a firm grip on the steering wheel, and coast as much as possible if you have space. If you need to use the brakes, just use them lightly. If you're on a freeway or if you're in a bad spot, move your vehicle onto the shoulder and then drive nice and slowly with the flat tire to a safe place.
When we have a brake failure, something that we fail to do is look at other alternatives to avoid the crash. We panic. You can always shift down into a lower gear. There's always an emergency brake that you could use. You can always use steering as an option. So those are some things we need to think about if the brakes go out. Sometimes the brakes go out, it just means that they've lost some fluid and that extra pressure is necessary.
Usually, if you have a power steering or brake failure, it's because you have engine failure as well. If you can continue to control your vehicle and move onto the shoulder and coast to a stop, that's fine. If your vehicle comes to a stop and you're in the traffic lane and you can't move it to a shoulder because of engine failure, then you're best off turning on your four-way flashers and then moving away from the vehicle onto the shoulder yourself and calling for assistance. Immediately after the accident happens, if no one's injured, and it's a property damage only collision, meaning that it's only the vehicles that have been damaged, then it is okay to move those vehicles out of the roadway. Many drivers are under the impression that they have to preserve the scene. If someone's injured and they can't be moved, yes, you'd want to leave those vehicles there. But otherwise, if everyone's fine, there's nothing wrong with moving those vehicles out of the traffic lane. The last thing you want is to have another accident. You'd also want to exchange information with the other drivers if there are other drivers involved. And we all have a responsibility. When we think of the term hit and run, we think of someone actually fleeing from a scene in a hurry. But that also covers things like your responsibility to exchange your personal information as far as the information on your driver's license, the information on your vehicle registration, and insurance information. If you leave the scene and you don't exchange that information, that is considered hit and run, the same as a person that actually flees from a scene.